My name is Martha and I am the moderator for Group 4. I will address our first question. According to White and the Camacho text, what is the nature of environmental injustice as related to food? In the writing Race, Class, and Environmental Hazards, White discussed the connection between areas where we find the most contaminated food and lower income areas which are predominantly for people of color. Kayla's video mentions this, and particularly a Savannah plant where several nuclear accidents had occurred. Knowledge of these accidents is surfaced 20 years after the fact. The non-white male cancer rates rose faster in the South, in South Carolina, Georgia, and North Carolina, than in the rest of the nation after the first accident. An issue concerning the cancer rates was the common diet among the African American communities. The article states that food staples such as catfish and bream from the Savannah River were 100,000 times higher than average for fresh fish in New York City. Poultry, fish, milk, grains, and collard greens were severely affected as well. These were food staples for these communities. People of color in locations in Washington, Baltimore, and Detroit were also at risk due to the contamination of food such as milk and fish. The Navajo and Chippewa, whom did not live in the inner cities, were also at risk because of contaminated fish, deer, and wild rice, which were also dietary staples for their communities. Another issue addressed on the videos was the inability to leave these affected areas. Economics, of course, are a large part of the high rate of cancer among people of color because of their inability to move away from these things. A major factor in these diets and the areas these people are forced to occupy are determined by their income. The wealthy are not going to allow one of these hazardous waste producers to move near them or choose to live near them. They're not going to live near a nuclear plant or any industrial or manufacturing business. Kayla and Zach mentioned Bullard's argument that hazardous waste facilities are disproportionately located in areas where people of color live because of economic constraints, and they're forced to live in these conditions. I found the term environmental blackmail described these issues very well. Zach mentions that White goes on to state that a society that allows such a pattern of coincidences has failed to equally protect its citizens. This failure itself constitutes an environmental injustice. These are all very important points when considering the cause and effect of environmental irresponsibility. They are also a measure of our society's value, the point at which we as a people and the people of the world are able to distinguish between who we say we are as a nation and who we really are. Our inhumane treatment, and I can see it no other way, of our own citizens is unforgivable and shows our true colors. As we discover in the next question, the objectification of humans allows for the apathetic, if not sadistic, treatment of American citizens in the name of capitalism. What does Boshin mean when he writes of the objectification of humans and the environment? Boshin says, and I quote, "The concept of an ecological society must begin from a sense of assurance that society and nature are not inherently antithetical." End quote. Kayla begins by discussing objectification, that it is to assign meaning to terms that are not necessarily accurate, bringing into focus human and nature. We have separated these meanings of human and environment. We no longer see a connection between the two terms. We see nature as separate rather than a part of us. Kayla quotes Boshin, "Civilization has rarely considered the good of humanity, much less that of nature," and goes on to say not only have we completely separated the two terms, but we've lost respect for both terms. He reminds us to bring the two terms back together, simplify, and look at the world as a whole, to assign meaning to the terms humans and nature, for instance. Sometimes the meanings are completely incorrect. Zach states that society as a whole is and has forever been selfish, and we have viewed people and the earth as tools. We've rarely given any regard to the consequences of how we've treated the earth or people for that matter. These views offer great insight into the question of objectification as defined by Boshin. I believe Boshin is saying that we objectify because as humans we find it necessary to label everything, especially that which we do not understand because it provides a sense of control. Many religions objectify animals and nature in the interest of creating a godlike persona for its parishioners, so they feel superior to the very earth that nurtures them. He also, by simply objectifying an animal, a tree, or part of the earth or nature, we can then use it in any way we deem necessary. They can then, in all good conscience, cut a 1,000-year-old tree down to make toothpicks, kill a species because it is in the way of progress, or simply destroy the water supply through fracking. All of these examples are myopic at best. Any interest in the future of not only the animals, vegetation, water supply, geological stability of the planet, and the humans involved is blurred in the interest of financial gain, and in some instances negate the objectification in order to further an agenda, suggesting that corporations or people would be an example. Kayla discusses how we have separated these meanings of human and environment. We no longer see a connection between the two terms. We see nature as separate rather than a part of us. And it can be a problem. Focus on domination, production, and outside factors rather than the fact that we are all a part of one world. He is trying to bring us back to the realization that we can coexist and all life on this planet is intricately connected. Kayla also mentioned from the readings that civilization has rarely considered the good of humanity, much less that of nature. She goes on to say not only have we separated the terms, but we have lost respect for both. This reading reminds us to bring the terms back together and look at the world as a whole. To look at the world as a whole would help us come to terms with the fact that we are an integral part of the life cycle. Rather than believing that humans and nature are objects rather than living beings fully dependent on each other, we as humans will destroy the very life we do depend on. The objectification of humans, animals, and life forms in general began long ago, as we can see from Boshin's writings. The blatant disregard for the earth and apathy toward its inhabitants has spread like a disease throughout the lands and spans the generations. Many Native American tribes believed and still do that they were and are part of the cycle of nature and were and are spiritually connected with the animals and plants off which they survived. Their beliefs sustained them mentally, spiritually, and physically. The belief that one species of life does not supersede another and that by only using what was needed showed respect for the lives that were sacrificed for their sustenance. They only showed respect from Mother Earth, who provided their needs. Had this society been allowed to survive as it was, perhaps this may have been the utopian society Boshin briefly mentioned.